washed away my sin and done an honest way. Should have vanquished all my evil and broke free from that.
So there you go. It is January 29th, 2018. I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, and no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people and look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we are streaming live on Facebook Live, and we are also streaming on Livestream. So if you're not familiar with Livestream, it is a streaming service that, frankly, the camera that we use, Mevo, is a product of Livestream. So this live streaming, video live streaming, is occurring both on Livestream and on Facebook Live. So if for whatever reason you have trouble, and I know we had a little bit of trouble last week, we dropped off about halfway through the show on Facebook, but we did continue on Livestream. So if for whatever reason you have trouble on one platform, by all means try the other. What I do have to say is we do post the videos up in its best form, as just raw, as video that is not dependent on bandwidth and streaming and all that other stuff, but it's just the footage of the program. We post that on YouTube as quickly as we can. Oftentimes, even the same night, but usually the next day. And if you want to watch the show with the highest quality, that's probably your best bet is catching the show after the fact on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV, and I encourage you to subscribe to that, and you'll get notifications every time we post a new video. Look, I'm John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. I have in studio with me, I've got Jake Proud, who is manning our camera and the board, pulling up our audio, including our opening song, which was by Logan Stats, who is somebody riding a bit of a bullet here, and so we're going to jump on that and right on his coattails and play some of his songs as well from his CD, Goodbye Goldia. And again, we're happy to do so. It was great to meet Logan a few years ago, and I'm in awe of his success with CTV's The Launch and his new single, which is I'm the Lucky One, or The Lucky One, I guess. And so, again, I wish him luck with that. Look, our studio engineer is Kelly McMillan. I want to thank her for the fine work that she's done in assembling our equipment and keeping us up and running. But I want to get right into it. My last show, which I think was a very, very good show, and if you didn't catch the show I think it was on the 26th, and that was our 200th show, so as we labeled them, number 200, this is 201. I talked about Snow Snake, and for many people who understand what the game is, what the competition is, what Snow Snake is about, they may not, and I'm not saying they do not, but they may not know of the correlation between Snow Snake and our culture, the Guyana Goa, the relationship between the path that we make for the Snow Snake to travel in, the channel that we make, and how that correlates with the path that the Guyana Goa, the great good path, represents. How the Snow Snake itself, with how we look for the wood with the best integrity and the straightest grain, and something that we can keep straight and keep in that path. How that correlates to the title holders that we place responsibility on, the Royan or Rodionisu, or the chiefs, or even the clan mothers for that matter, and how that correlation works, and how the Snow Snake itself has no power except for the power that we give it. And I got into that with the last show, and I encourage you to check it out so you can understand what is that relationship and how it's connected. Oftentimes through that show, it perhaps was difficult to know whether I was talking about snow snake or talking about our culture because they are so closely related. But on today's show, I want to talk specifically about the Guyana Goa. I want to talk about what people call the Great Law, sometimes the Great Law of Peace. It doesn't really translate to that. It really translates to that the great path or the great good path or way. Um, and it is a path that has been worn across our lands by the millions of feet that came before us in terms of our ancestors and our grandfathers and grandmothers and all those that have come, for millennia before us. And that path has given us um, a process to solve problems, to address issues, not just day to day, common issue, occurrences, everything from funerals to marriages to births to naming. It not only addresses those things, but addresses the rare occasions for things like war or strife or real calamity that could befall a community, not just a family. So it is an important part of our history, but the unfortunate part is we aren't necessarily living by that anymore. It's part of our identity. It is in our DNA. But to borrow the expression, we haven't removed the dust from it. We haven't given it the time. Part of the irony of talking about snow snake last week was I could demonstrate how meticulous the time is spent in not only crafting the path that we will hurl these snow snakes down in this competition, how meticulously attentive our people can be in crafting these things. And not everybody, but the few people who take that responsibility on to make sure that the channel is smooth and it's long and it's straight and so we can get the maximum out of this process, out of this competition. We give it a lot of care. We give a lot of care to crafting the snow snakes, the short ones, the long ones, the ones our children may use for competition. Everything from selecting the raw materials to shaping it and carving it and applying the oils and everything that we need to make it so it'll slide through the snow and the ice the best it can. Weighting the front of it with lead perhaps or whatever we see fit to give it its best performance. But then I look at how very little attention we've given to the path that we should be living our lives on, that Guyana Goa, that great good path. I know recently over the last few years there's been these events that we call Great Law recitals, and really they've been more akin to recounting the peacemaker's journey and less about explaining the process and the protocols, the responsibilities, all of those things that the Guyana Goa lays out for us to resolve conflicts in our territory. We don't talk about the process. We don't talk about how to counsel. We don't talk about how an issue comes to the floor of our longhouse. Who receives it? How does it go from? How does an issue be raised within a longhouse get addressed? How does an issue from outside the longhouse get addressed? We haven't talked about the role of the wampum runner, the one who carries the message to other communities for Grand Council. And keep in mind, we have council at the community level, we have council at our nation's level, if you will, and then we have council at the Confederacy level, at Grand Council. And we aren't recounting that process. So even as and the Tuscaroras are preparing to host the next quote unquote recital, I mean, the real hope for many of us is that it doesn't just relate the same, story of the peacemaker again. And not the story and the foundation of everything from the strife that we were involved in before the Ganawida made his journeys, and the significance of the story on how that is recounted. That's all relevant. But if we only stop with the journey, if we only tell the story, and it's more of a story than when we do that, and less about reciting what the Gallina de Goa is. So when we talk about a recital, and it may take, it's more than a couple of days. I mean, like I said, we've devoted all kinds of time for a snow snake competition. We invest all kinds of time to host a basketball tournament. We invest a fair amount of time to host the Garillo campaigns. But we have not invested the time to make sure that when we gather and talk about the Gallina de Goa, that we will fill people with enough information that when they leave, they will have learned process. They will have learned how to counsel, how to generate a counsel, who has the right to generate counsel, all of that stuff, rights, responsibilities, process, procedures. Again, everything from marriage to death. I mean, these are the things. I hear a lot of people that are quick to cite a certain wampum number and say, well, according to wampum 58, such and such, and and I've heard people from all different parts of the spectrum, I guess, within Haudenosaunee territory. The warriors who will cite black wampum, and the and the holy men who will try to weave in the spiritual aspects of this thing, or separate spirituality in terms of the Code of Handsome Lake versus the Great Law. I mean, I've heard all of that stuff, and without getting into that, I would rather see a dedicated time, a dedicated effort to give a more clear understanding on what process is. I mean, I don't know. I'm not condemning ahead of time or praising ahead of time what will take place at Tuscarora. I think Tuscarora is in a unique situation because perhaps them more than anyone deserve some answers about process. I mean, think about Tuscarora, who really, for whatever reason, and I attribute more to the arrogance of the Five Nations, has not had that circle wampum opened up with their families inserted. When we look at that circle wampum, we say 49 families and the Taradaho title. We don't say, oh yeah, and then there's these families from Tuscarora. So for all intents and purposes, the Tuscarora have been kind of blocked from fully being embraced as a part of the Haudenosaunee and a part of the Six Nations, really. I mean, I know how Tuscarora's council at Grand Council, they sit with the Cayuga and the Oneida as the younger brothers. But again, if you look at that condolence cane, there's no Tuscaroras on there. And why not? Why hasn't it been added? How come the Tuscarora titles have not been added to that? So, I mean, I think the Tuscaroras have a valid question to be raised. Whether it'll get raised this time or not is again another question. But along those lines, there are so many processes that could be laid out right from the very beginning. And I think it's great to tell the story of the Ganawida and how, and it seems like more recently there's been more of an emphasis on certain parts of that story, that legend, that story that leads to the Ganawida coming along amongst the Five Nations. But there still has not been a definitive account of process, of again, rights and responsibilities, duties. Oftentimes I hear people talk about the authority of a clan mother or the authority of a chief. I've heard all kinds of mischaracterizations about Onondaga being the capital and that Taradaho being the chief of chiefs and all of that. I mean, and all that stuff is wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. I mean, Onondaga is the central fire geographically. It's got Mohawks and Oneidas to the again historically to the east, and it's got Cayugas and Senecas to the west. And then of course the Tuscaroras came at first sitting amongst the younger brothers in Oneida territory, and then ultimately taking residence and among the Senecas in the western part of the western door. But there is not process defined, and frankly, that's what's sorely needed. Like I said, when you play that snow snake game, if you don't create that path, then what is the snake supposed to travel along? If we don't lay that foundation about what is the path, what is Guyana to Goa, what are the processes, then what do we raise a council for? I mean, especially when we talk about things at the Confederacy level. But if we don't have this stuff defined, even at the most local levels, look, I'm not talking about overthrow of tribal councils or anything else. That process can be used at so many different levels, and the understanding of that process, the whole idea of the role that fire plays in who we are, a fire representing both our families and our council. And I don't mean just a council of men or a council of people, but our right to counsel. All that stuff is defined in that. But unfortunately, it's not widely known. We don't have that broader understanding of what is our process. And that's what's sorely needed. I mean, that is what's missing. And, and part of it, yeah, I don't know, we could argue that part of the reason the process isn't laid out is because we aren't following it. So we get into a catch-22. We aren't following the process, so we don't want to let everybody know what the process is because we don't want what? We don't want to let the cat out of the bag? The way for us to fix ourselves going forward, the way for us to recapture our identity in terms of process and procedure, the whole idea of understanding that without these rigid institutions of governance and structure that Europeans and white men and people all over the planet have adopted, including some of ours with their band councils and that kind of thing. Without that, there is still the ability to ensure order. And I don't mean order in terms of New World Order, but I mean peace and harmony. Not complacency or stagnation. Our culture is based on our observations of nature. I know there's a whole lot of people who like to rave about how spiritual we are as a people. And where my concern rests, and the reason I open the show the way I open the show, is I'm not sure that that's the right language. Obviously it's English, so that's wrong language right there, but I'm not even sure what the English words are saying are proper. Because I don't consider us to be a supernatural being. I think that's arrogance speaking. And I also don't think the things that we embrace as our culture, whether it's snow snake, lacrosse, our language, or the Guyana to Goa, to suggest that was given to us by God or creator or some divine intervention from a deity of some sort. To me, that sells our people very short. It says that our people were incapable of developing these things by themselves. They needed divine intervention to make any of this stuff happen. Our people developed language. Our people developed sport, and they developed arts, and they developed stories, and they developed governing structures. Hey, even when the Ganawida came amongst our people, it wasn't to reinvent or to invent for the first time, I should say, structures. It was to remind us who we were and who we are. The Ganawida's job was to remove the dust and to help us restore peace. Sure, there was perhaps more definition put to some of this process. Again, the commitment that was made at that time was that we would recite this process and we would do this on a regular basis, so nobody would be left misunderstanding. Well, that's been a major failure on our part. Like I said, we have no problem investing plenty of time in other things. Some things that are very counterproductive, and some things that ironically so much parallel who we are. Like I said, snow snake. I mean, the beauty of that that competition and that action and everything about that is how it correlates and corresponds with who we are as a people. And yet, we have people very much devoted to snow snake and not so devoted to Guyana-Lagoa. Look, I'm among, people who tout the value of Guyana-Lagoa all the time. But there are people that that may tout it all the time, but we all seem to fail at instituting the application of Guyana-Lagoa to who we are and how we govern ourselves. And I don't mean govern in terms of the institution, but how we conduct ourselves. Again, we've allowed it to be mischaracterized and called the great law of peace. The word peace isn't in the word. Guyana-Lagoa. Goa means great. So it's really defining it as a great way, a great path. It's a good path that we could follow and do great things with. And we have, and we've done it for thousands of years. Frankly, even before the Gondowida, we had many elements of this process that we walked away from. We walked away from it then, and we've walked away from it now. Now, we don't need the return of the Gondowida. We don't need divine intervention. We need a commitment. We need a commitment from our own people. Look, I'm glad to hear the conversations beginning about recitals, I guess, or these discussions. But whatever we do has to be interactive enough and comprehensive enough, and maybe not. And when I say comprehensive, it's got to be comprehensive in a way that when people leave an event explaining the Guyana-Lagoa, that they should immediately be able to apply some of it. I think this idea of throwing bits and pieces and, stay tuned, we'll do another one next year. And each year we're going to add little tidbits of information? Or is that really what's planned? We need to understand this. And again, this isn't about undermining, elected councils anywhere. But for those of us who are really concerned about our identity, are really concerned about defending sovereignty or decolonization, the first step to decolonization is untangling us from the assimilation and the indoctrination that is so tied to how we live our lives. So when we can begin the process of understanding how do we counsel? I mean, I know how the Oneidas counsel. I know how the three clans sit in a longhouse, and what the process is supposed to be. I know how it is in Mohawk. I mean, I'm Mohawk, and I know how it's supposed to happen in Longhouse. I know that the bears sit against the eastern wall of the Longhouse, and the wolves are sitting at the north, and the turtles are on the south, and that it is the turtles are considered, and again using English words, I'm afraid, but are considered the well, and that they are the ones who will present a topic, and that it is a again metaphorically sent across the fire to the wolf, and then they, but these issues have already been made aware of. The clans have been made aware of these issues. So when there is deliberation taking place in a longhouse, clans have already been consulted. I mean, the first thing is that everybody is made aware of what's going to be discussed in a longhouse. All three sides of the longhouse, and again for Mohawk, I'm talking about the turtle and the wolf and the bear. All three titles within each one of those clans, all 9 are represented there. And when the turtles present their position, because that position would have been already determined in within that clan, to the wolf, if the wolf agree, then pretty much the decision is ratified. Of course, the bear do have an opportunity to speak. If they don't agree, they have an opportunity to speak and perhaps raise an issue that hadn't been considered. And if out of those three sides of the longhouse a decision isn't made, then if they aren't in agreement, again, those men don't have the authority to make a decision. They've carried the voice of their clan there. Then they take it back to their clans, and they say, well, this is what was been presented. We were in agreement with the wolf, but then the bear raised this issue, and it's a valid issue. We should discuss it, and then maybe, if not reconsider, at least address the concerns. I mean, this isn't an impossible process. Is it one that gets done in a day? Maybe not. But see, we aren't even teaching that process. Here in Seneca territory, I have not even been able to ascertain what are the three sides of the longhouse. Now, I assume, since the Oneidas and the Mohawks use this system, and Grand Council uses the system, because Grand Council uses the very same system. The Onondagas are at the eastern side. You have the younger brothers on the north, and you have the older brothers on the south. So you have the Cayuga, the Oneida, and the Tuscarora counseling on one side of the longhouse. You have the Senecas and the Mohawks on the other side. And the third side is where the Onondaga sit. The three sides, this is a principle of how to counsel within the Haudenosaunee, within the Guyana-Goa. Yet I don't think that, I haven't gotten a straight answer on who sits where in a Seneca longhouse. This should be known. And it should be known for the Tuscarora. It should be known for the Cayuga, for the Onondaga. And a process should be followed. Those men who have been placed with the responsibility of representing those family titles do not have authority. They're like that snow snake. They have no power except for what the people give them. And I've even heard Oren Lyons, who to me has represented somebody who's abused authority, and he's not even a chief, he's a faith keeper. But I've heard him time and time again reiterate that the chiefs have no power, that the power is vested in the people. But that's not how it works on Onondaga. It's nice to say that. See, and I'm not suggesting that these Guyana-Goa recitals or events or discussions or conferences, whatever you want to call them, classes, need to be about peeling the scab off of old wounds. But you know what? It should be a healing process. We should understand the process going forward. That is the reason to address this. Yeah, in a recent trip up to Akwesasne, we talked about this. And I started talking to some folks, and I know this sounds taboo, but considering the resources that I've gathered for doing this show and for creating platforms for disseminating information, I'm considering about trying to do a series of videos with people that I know the language and understand the aspects of the Guyana-Goa, to get it on tape, to get it recorded, and we can stream it live. We can post it as YouTube videos. Look, we're not afraid of somebody else learning what the process is. In fact, some white people could learn something from this as well. Certainly, band councils could learn something about process. But more importantly, the people need to know. They need to know what their rights are, what their responsibilities are, and what the process is. They should know what is said at a funeral, what is said at a wedding, what is said in the naming of their children, all that stuff. But more importantly, they should know how to raise an issue amongst their people, how to raise it within their clan, how to raise it within their nation, how to raise it within Grand Council if necessary. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour, so let's take a break here, and we'll come back. I want to talk a little bit more about this, and I got a couple of other issues I want to throw out there, but I'm not done yet. So come on back right after this, another music track.
And she works down in that coffee shop, the busiest street of a murder town. And she knows just what she wants, with a smile with the now long days got her down. If the bright lights stop blinding me, looks like we're in for a ride, yeah. And you can always confide in me. And darling, just hold on tight, yeah. There ain't no turning back, and there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back. Just can't stand the thought of another man. And there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back, and there ain't no running home. Just can't stand the thought of another man. The curtains close, the dust is settled down. Sound much too big for this little town. The tip of my tongue, you can hear my sound. The top of my lungs, you just watch me drown. Oh, if the bright lights stop blinding me, looks like we're in for a ride. And you can always confide in me. And I just hold on tight, yeah.
There was a song came on the radio, a guitar instrumental, and it changed everything.
Link Ray, it's rock and roll.
Rumble. Yeah, that's the one.
Rumble.
Hey, Rumble.
Rumble had the power to help me say, I'm going to be a musician.
And then I found out that he was an Indian.
The music that we know here in the United States is fully supported by input from Native and Indigenous people.
Sego, this is John Kane from WBAI's Let's Talk. Join me on January 31st at 7 p.m. at the Brooklyn Commons, 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, as we kick off 2018 with a free screening of Rumble, the Indians Who Rocked the World. All right, thanks for coming back. Yeah, I am screening that film Wednesday in New York at the Brooklyn Commons, and so any of you who listening to this show who are in New York, or any of you plan to go to New York, happen to be there on Wednesday, it'd be great for you to stop down at the Brooklyn Commons at 388 Atlantic Avenue. This is something that I've been doing on a regular basis, although we kind of relax a little bit during the winter months because it's just not as easy to host events, holidays, and all kinds of other stuff. But the idea of hosting events on the last Wednesday of every month is something that I've been doing now for a couple of years, and I've shown a number of films. I've had live performers, musicians, speakers. We've done a couple of speaker or roundtable discussions, and so this is kind of what we've been doing. And this is an opportunity for me to show a film that that is really educational and entertaining at the same time. So that's Rumble, the Indians Who Rocked the World. We'll be screening that film on Wednesday at the Brooklyn Commons, 7 p.m. And when we do these events, we usually include a little bit of a Q&A afterwards and some conversation. So I look forward to that. I look forward to the people who come out. And again, any of you listen to this show, if you have an opportunity to be there in New York on Wednesday, come down and see us in Brooklyn. It'd be a good time. Hey, look, I want to thank my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, my good friends Ed Schindler, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and many others who have helped this program to continue to educate, entertain, and inform over the last 7 years. We're in our 8th year now. I thank you all for joining in the fight, even if it's been in the past, joining in the fight and doing your part to help us have these conversations. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache RadioNet for providing our streaming. And I want to thank CKWE, that's the Gwe in Tandanega, for both their simulcast and rebroadcast, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying Let's Talk Native on their networks. I also want to thank my wife and others who share this show, not only as the Facebook live stream, but they share the SoundCloud audio posts that I do immediately after the show. I encourage people to share the YouTube videos. They really are the video of the show in its best form, even though it's not necessarily live. I encourage people to share those videos. They are stored there on our Let's Talk Native TV channel for people to go back and visit anytime and check out some of the conversations that we've had here. And sometimes we guests in studios, and sometimes I take this full 1 hour show and take the opportunity to explain things that that I just think people need to reconsider, or if they didn't know it, then they need to hear it for the first time. If I'm just removing the dust for them, then that's great too. Or if I'm saying something that you simply don't agree with, that's not a terrible thing. I think, the idea of having conversations that can be a debate, that can be maybe even a little contentious. I'm not trying to make any enemies here, but I think there are some tough conversations that need to take place. And what I'm talking about here in terms of the absolute need for us to regain and recapture such a significant part of who we are, which is the Guyana Lagoa. In the absence of doing that, we will continue to flounder in both our identity, in terms of the direction and the strategy. I mean, Guyana Lagoa, it's a path. It's a great path. And in the absence of that path, we're wandering and we're lost. And there's an aspect of the Guyana Lagoa that also says that when somebody does deviate from the path, I know we always hear, oh, that such and such, left the circle. And we hear that all the time. Oh, they left the circle. Now they're gone, or they committed treason, or they should be banished. Look, the way it was told to me is that within the Guyana Lagoa, if we see somebody has gone astray, the idea isn't to slam the door shut behind them. It's to bring them back. We have an obligation to be inclusive. We talk about the white roots of peace. In the very beginning of the Guyana Lagoa, the Ganawida speaks of this great tree, this great tree of peace, the symbol of who we are as a confederacy, as a people. And he says these trees have four roots going in the major directions, and we will call these roots the white roots of peace. And any man, meaning person, not man versus woman, but any man has the right to follow those roots back, to seek shelter under that great tree of peace. That's inclusion. That's not exclusion. That's not shutting the door. That's not telling people to stay away. You're too different. These are the concepts that frankly we've lost. And it's funny, as much as we've allowed ourselves to be absorbed into policies of assimilation, we've allowed ourselves to be indoctrinated into many of the aspects of racial bias, condemnation of others, even not just others, condemnation of each other. This is what we need to resolve. And that's why it is so necessary for us to learn what some of this process is. Look, I'm not suggesting we need to learn a definitive answer about right or wrong, about who's right and wrong. What we need to learn is about process for resolving conflict. Not who's right and wrong. Our culture is based on restorative justice. It's based on restoring harmony, restoring peace. Peace isn't a stagnant. It's not a noun. It's an action. Skana. It's about balance. It's not just about peace in terms of the absence of conflict. And power, that peace, power, and righteousness, that power is it's that power that we give. Yeah, sure, it's the power that we give to that snake, right? But it's the power of mind and body. It's the strength to do the right thing. It's the strength to learn that path and travel that path. And that path is the righteousness. It is what's right. So when we hear these expressions, we're not giving. We say peace, power, and righteousness. We say great law of peace. We say we revere women, but we do nothing to stop domestic violence. We don't bring any of those issues back into the process. No, we'd rather call the police or CPS or do, I don't know, use some outside agency to resolve our conflicts. We don't even consider a process within the Guyana Lagoa. I mean, the question is, how did we get so lost? How did we get so far removed from such an important part of who we are? Look, our lives should be a journey of gaining knowledge. And I don't mean just letting information just pour into our heads that have no rhyme or reason. Good information, bad information, within the Guyana Lagoa, they talk about, it's in there about what should be heavy on our minds, and that we should not be, obsessed with rumor and gossip, that we should not be, obsessed with hate and deceit. I mean, these are some of the things that are specifically spoken, at least as it's been, as I understand it, as I've learned it. And I'm not suggesting I know the every in and out. Frankly, there's not enough people who have applied this thing practically in modern times. I mean, and when I say modern times, I'm talking about in decades. I've seen elements of this. I've seen it shine through. I've seen it used in processes. I haven't seen the broad application of it. And I think this whole idea of learning about process and learning how to counsel, why to counsel, when to counsel, and not just to counsel and COUNCIL, but COUNSEL, how to counsel each other. I mean, I'm not just talking about the wellness center, or a rehab facility or therapy with, with Sigmund Freud. What do we do? How do we counsel each other? How do we advise our loved ones and the people close to us? How do we provide counsel? And how do we provide the platform for that counsel? That's what needs to be revisited, folks. And I can't emphasize that enough. I do want to take a few minutes, though, and although clearly I have not solved the problem here with this discussion, what I'm doing is inviting the conversation, and I will take some effort upon myself to begin to bring people together, to do some recordings, perhaps here in my own studio, but maybe even take some of this on the road and go to other communities, to try to create a recounting of process and addressing so many of the elements. Look, I'm not trying to do a Confederacy sanctioned great law recital on tape. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that will be educational, that will teach people. And at least if you hear it, and then you can go to people to ask, well, is that correct? I mean, if you doubt, and I look, doubt is a valid emotion. Critical thinking is important. Being able to ask questions and get answers is important. So if in creating a series of videos here, explaining the Guyana de Goa, the process, the rights, the responsibilities. And I'm not suggesting anybody, if they see these videos as we produce them, that they should say, oh, now I know the great law because I saw those videos. No, now it's about applying some of this stuff and using reason and critical thinking to say, geez, did I understand that right? Or did he get something wrong? Or did the man on that video, or the person on the video, say something that I don't agree with? Because I've also heard people say, we don't have a right to pick and choose what we believe in. Look, in terms of Guyana de Goa, we're not asking you to believe anything. Asking you to adopt a process to resolve conflicts and to resolve issues and to make decisions and further our lives. But we will do some of that here. And at the same time, I still encourage. I'm glad to see Tuscarora stepping up and are going to host an event. I hope it's informative, and I hope the one after that is informative. And I'm hoping out of all of us who are engaged in this conversation about learning Guyana de Goa, I hope all of us add elements to it to the point where people can say, "Let me try that. Let me try to use that process. I don't think we've used it in a long time." That's the encouragement. That's what I look for. Look, one of my listeners asked me to recount. You know, as many of you know, I do talk about Hawaii fairly often, and I'm inspired by the Hawaiian people who are doing what they can to assert their sovereignty and are fighting for the restoration of their nation, their kingdom. I'm inspired by all those who would dare do a series of videos and stand up and protest and carry a sign that says, "I'm not an American. I'm a Hawaiian. I'm a Hawaiian national. I'm a Hawaiian subject. I'm, whatever." I mean, it is encouraging. But I'll tell you, the Hawaiians are under siege constantly. On one front, there's an attempt, and this goes back to, not just to the Obama administration, but back to the Clinton administration and guys like Daniel Inouye and Daniel Akaka, who are these senators from Hawaii, who have been attempting to turn them into an Indian tribe, like we've fared so well with our trust relationship with the United States. And that's why so many Hawaiian people say, hell no. You're not going to turn us into some subordinate Indian tribe. We know that 125 years ago, a crime was committed, an illegal act, an overthrow of our throne, of our crown, of our queen, an overthrow of our governance, and the start of an illegal occupation. And it was done with military force, and it was done illegally in terms of U.S. law and Hawaiian law and international law. So I'm inspired by that. And a couple of things. I mean, I mentioned, if not last week, but the week before, I mentioned one individual who was actually arrested for refusing to speak English in a court proceeding in Hawaii. He was arrested for some protest or demonstration, and he would only speak Hawaiian. And rather than getting a translator for him, they decided to arrest him and hold him in contempt of court. Apparently, that may have been lifted, but that's just one example. There's an ongoing and relentless battle that has been ensuing over Mauna Kea, the highest mountain in Hawaii, one that has already been desecrated by telescopes, but now the ones that are there aren't enough. They want to build a 30-meter telescope on the top of this mountain, and this has been a fight going on for years. So you have sovereignty fights, you have land issues fights, and of course there's also still battles going on over what are considered crown lands and lands that that are supposed to be owned by the native Hawaiians that are constantly under siege. And I know there is a fight going on, and my friend Leilani Teal has asked me if I would the possibility of mentioning the Wailua Ancestral Lands standoff happening right now on Kauai, and it has to do with a fight. I think at an old hotel, but it's called the Cocoa Palms. If you go to my group page, she's got a link here where there's a change.org petition to sign and a video kind of explaining the conflict. And this is one of many conflicts that the Hawaiians are always engaged in. But I feel a real kinship by what the Hawaiian people are going through. I mean, one of the things that's a little different is our valuable lands, we've been pushed off of many years ago. So a lot of times where our native populations are residing are in far out of the way places, oftentimes still with minerals that the federal government and others are after. But the entire island, set of islands in Hawaii, are something that the Hawaiian people are still trying to defend all of it, whether it's bombing sites that the military is using to, just to, contaminate with their weaponry, whether it's the water around the islands that the military is contaminating with their weaponry, or whether it's, illegal farming or, hotel development, the idea of, redirecting water and other resources, for the specific and explicit purpose of benefiting rich white people who want to regard Hawaii as their own private island paradise, while the bulk of the Hawaiian population is still like the native population on Turtle Island, mired in poverty and homelessness and despair. So I encourage you, go again, if you look for the post, and I'll repost the link on my group page, but please do look at the petition for Cocoa Palms, and look at what's happening there. I don't have I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I do have a link on that has been posted by Lulani Teal on my Facebook group page, and I encourage you to look at it and sign the petition and support. Support what these guys are doing. These guys are on the front line, and I would say more on the front line than the Ongwe on Turtle Island, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm hoping that we learn something. I'm hoping we learn from their courage and their resolve to fight for their autonomy and their distinction, their kingdom. Decolonization in the truest form. I know that they're still mired in much of the assimilation that came with the church and the military and and capitalism. I know that those are not easy things to shed. We've got church influence embedded deeply in our people, all of our native people and people of color across the globe. It's one of the primary tools that were used. In fact, it is the primary tool that they used for legal, for them to so-called have a legal framework for dispossession of our lands. That's the doctrine of discovery. And in spite of that weapon, that church dogma being used to exterminate us, to enslave us, to dispossess us of our lands, to subject us to poverty and residential schools, many of our people adopted the faith. And this is a problem in all of our lands, including in Hawaii. So being able to separate some of that is very difficult for some of our people. But I'll tell you that some of the first steps is trying to assert yourself as a distinct people. And that decolonization and that stripping of some of those influences is something that it's a process. It's like the Guyana to go. It's a process. So I stand with the folks, with the Kanaka Maoli and all those those Hawaiian people, the Hawaiian people, not Americans living in the fake state of Hawaii. I'm with them, and eventually I'll physically stand with them, and I hope to do that soon. But I'll not vacation in Hawaii. I will go to show solidarity and support, and to meet with people that I've come to know over the years. Many of them who I've gotten a chance to meet here on the continent in New York and other places, but many that I've gotten to associate with. If you see a unity flag or warrior flag flying at a Hawaiian standoff, there's a good chance I sent it, because I sent dozens to Hawaii, and they've been used in every place from. In fact, one of the flags that was hoisted up in Mauna Kea was shredded by the wind up there, and a friend of mine who I sent a flag to sent hers to replace it. In fact, I still owe her one. But no, there's a kinship here, and I think there's something to be learned, and not just learned, but there's some inspiration that comes from what the Hawaiian people are fighting for. So again, as I post, and my friends from Hawaii post issues about the conflicts they're having, take the time and look at it, understand it. It's fascinating, and it's engaging, but it also is a reminder of what we all need to do here as well. Hey, one other comment I want to mention. I guess it was a news item that the Cleveland baseball team is going to get rid of Wahoo on their uniforms and on their caps. Well, now what we could do is get them to stop calling themselves Indians. Everybody had no problem attacking Elizabeth Warren for calling herself an Indian, but they'll let a whole team of people with baseball bats do it. So it's a step. And again, everything's a process. So at least they got rid of the cartoon, it appears. And, so I applaud that. Look, I am going to New York this week. I'm streaming, or I'm going to screen Rumble at the Brooklyn Commons, 3 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, at the behind the cafe in the media room, and that's Wednesday, the 31st at 7 p.m. And then I'll be doing my show in New York on Thursday morning from 10 till noon. So by all means, join me. We'll stream that on Facebook as well, and look forward to your calls and your comments. So again, thank you for listening to our program, and see you in New York or back here on Friday. Yahweh.
Simple song, simple man, a simple thrift store clothes and a simple thing. And he's gonna make it someday. He's gonna make it someday. That was a lifetime ago. A lifetime ago. Lifetime ago. A lifetime ago, a lifetime ago, lifetime ago. Ain't no thief gonna take my gold. Ain't no priest gonna save my soul. Ain't no thief gonna take my gold. Ain't no priest gonna save my soul. My soul. My poor soul. My soul. And you know me, I'm a believer. And you know me, I couldn't leave.